Hello everybody, I'm SleepyPanda27 and I'm making a video about the Aegis Qualifier tournament review. I just want to review the Aegis tournament, start going over the teams, start forming some storylines, go over some decks that worked, and I just want to present that in a quick fire way. So without further ado, here we go. I want to go over what the new format is. So the idea that Aegis is presenting this time is there's going to be two leagues. One is going to be the Championship League, which is like the pro league, the big leagues. These are going to be ideally the best Runeterra players. It's got a bigger prize pool, got a higher entry fee, and the top six teams are going to be locked for next season. So if you make the top six in the Champions League, you're guaranteed to be here next Aegis season. And then there's the Ascension League, which is a little bit smaller. These are the upcoming pros is the idea. It has a slightly smaller prize pool, but the top two teams of the Ascension League will go into a tournament with the bottom two teams from the Champions League, and they will contest for the next Champions League slots. So the way you get into the Champions League is through the Ascension League. And the Champions League is like, big money, big plays, really good stuff. That's the idea. To decide, this is the first actual season of this format. So to decide who's going to make it into which league, they're running a qualification tournament. So to fight, 30 teams signed up and only 16 can make it, 8 into the Champion League, 8 into the Advanced Ascension League. Each team will bring one lineup and do a best of three with other teams. These are going to be in collab sets, so it's not your normal Aegis thing of each player bringing their own lineup. It's one team versus one team, like a 1v1, and it's just going to be 5 rounds of Swiss. There will be 4 teams who win the first 3 rounds, and they'll get qualified into the Champions League immediately. So if you go 4-0, you don't have to play in round 4 and round 5. Everyone else is going to have to compete for those last slots. The tiebreakers are round win percent, game win percent, the opponent's round win percent, and the opponent's game win percent. Okay, let's go over the teams who won. So taking up our first seed was Guilty Conscience, which consists of Raw Raw Kills, Stolen Conch, Remney, and Beast Llama. They went 3-0 and had a 6-1 game score, so they only dropped one game. Their lineup was Gwen LeBlanc, Poppy Ziggs, and Jinx Lulu. The team that came in second was Aphrodite Alpha, which consists of Never Walk Alone. If you're an Americas player only, you might recognize this more as Rito Ruined My Life. Currently Rake 1 on the Americas leaderboard despite being a European player. Then you've got Jersey No, Armageddon, and Salty Simon. They had a game win percent of 6-2, performed really well. They were on Vex Mordekaiser, Victor Lee Sin, and Talia Zillion. The third place team, by the way, they were tied with the second place team, but had a slightly lower opponent round win percent. This was Red Lotus, consisting of Ronin, Falquetto, and Peace. They brought a triple P&Z lineup of Tristana Teemo, Sivir Nidalee, and Nocturne Vex. And then the fourth team that went 3-0 was Team Envy, consisting of Goofy, Y Rebellion, Yang Zero, and Void. They had a 6-3 game win percent. They brought Nocturne Vex, Lee Sin Victor, and Gwen LeBlanc. So these were our big champions, these 4 teams. These are the ones that qualified by winning the first 3 rounds without dropping a round. So to fill out the rest of the Champions League, these are all people who lost one of their first 3 rounds, which is actually my team, They Who Endure. That's me. SleepyFan27, Spids, Methodical, and Grey Merchant. We went 4-1 with a game win percent of 9-3. Next team is Breaking Bandle, consisting of Squallywog, Ninja Duelist, Talpinator, and Flip. They went 4-1, but they had a slightly worse game win score, so they were seeded as 6th. And then 7th was Copium Card Gamers, consisting of Lear or Lair. Sorry, I don't know the pronunciation. Jinden, Robomaster, Samsans. They went 4-1 with a game win percent of 9-5. And then our 8th seed slot is actually a team that went 3-2. And so their tiebreakers are consisted of their opponent round win percent. So Tokyo Warriors made it in going 3-2. This consists of Total, Trivio, and Easy to Win, who are all very recognizable. So yeah, I think our Champions League is looking pretty stacked. I think a lot of people recognize some very, very good players. Namely, Talpinator is the freaking previous world champion. Squallywag is like a cracked player that I think a lot of people know about. These are all names that I think have been around forever, and it's gonna be a good Champions League, I think. Rounding out our Ascension League, we have Guardians of Runeterra, who barely missed making it into the Champions League. You'll notice that their opponent round win percent was 44% compared to the 65 win percent of Tokyo Warriors. This consists of Constantine, Synergy, Trix Kit, and Sly Red Fox. Next is We Are So Arachnoback, which is 10 Stews, who you will probably know better by Zemix as their in-game name. Arachnobat, Rich Game Buddy. They also went 8-5 and had a 34% opponent round win percent, so you can see that these 3 seeds were, like, the tiebreakers mattered a lot. The next one is a familiar face, Red Pup Games. They went 3-2-7-6. It's Card Gamer, Cass, and Rusticles. Everyone should probably be familiar with this. Next is the Absolute team with Angelo 2S, In My White Room, Kimono Geo, who went 3-2 and 8-7. Very slightly worse record than 7-6. And then our bottom four of the Ascension League is going to be Lotus Zenit, consisting of Salazar, Akihiko, and Space. They had a 50% win rate, 7-7. Next is Stray Cats with M. Brooks, No Talent, and OJ. They had a slightly worse opponent round win percent, which is why they're seeded 6th. And then Muckle, which consists of Dial, Dr. Worm, Alsum, and they had a even worse opponent round win percent, which is why they're seeded 7th. And then our 8th seed actually ended up going 2-3. So 1, 2, 3 did make it into the 16 teams, and this opponent round win percent is a very important tiebreaker for the reason why they made it in. This is the cooler OTK. It's Shokrin, Fernet 14, and Tomate, Mystico, and Rodeo. And yeah, this is our Ascension League. I don't actually know the players on the Ascension League, a lot of the players on the Ascension League as well. I'm hoping that in the future I can make a video that goes a little bit more in depth to all the players so we can get some cool storylines going. That's the purpose of me making these videos. But these are our 16 teams that made it. I quickly wanted to go over the 4 teams that missed out because you'll notice that once again, this opponent round win percent was important for the cooler OTK making into the Ascension League, even though they went 2-3. So I also think that the 4 teams that barely missed out is I think everyone would have expected them to have made it in. Notably, Prism Pals with Real Prism Sword, Wolfpack, Malgos, and Angel had a slightly worse opponent round win percent at 36% compared to the 52%. I'm personally heartbroken about this one because Real Prism Sword and Wolfpack are previous Aegis teammates that I love dearly. They're awesome. So see them literally barely miss out makes me sad, and I'm sort of hoping that there's a team in the top 16 that ends up not paying their entry fee so that Prism Pals can get in. Crossing my fingers a little bit. The next one is also surprised. Church of Targon, previous Aegis winners, barely missed out. Also on a 2-3 score, but their game win percent was slightly worse. So at least it didn't come down to opponent win percent. This is Grandpa Roji, Calf, Light, and Scathus. Next is Shadow Owl's Money Gang, another very popular Aegis team of Lich, Hecate, Nos, and Hollow. Also, unfortunately, barely missing out. The reason I bring up their opponent game win percent is because that's the tiebreaker between them being seeded slightly lower than Church of Targon. You'll notice that their round game and opponent round win percent is the same. I just find that a funny detail. And then we have Hot Pink Cuties, who is Lunia, Ballfire, Lizzie, Kasai, also very popular in the Aegis scene. So I think it's really sad that all 4 of these teams missed out, but they'll definitely have a chance next season. And I think it'll be interesting to see some fresh faces in the new league anyway. So yeah, this is it. A little bit heartbreaking. And let's go over some decks. Pretty excited to go over what went well, what didn't. A lot of us have been taking a break from LOR, so what's the new meta look like? Let's talk about the elephants in the room. The elephants in the room, these are the 3 most brought decks. So they may not have won the most, but they were the most popular by far. And that's Nocturne Vex, Lulu Jinx, and Zilean Talia. And let's start with Nocturne Vex. It had a 40% win rate, but it was brought by more than half of the teams. You can see it did not perform well. Most of these matchups are losing. 3-4 means that, it won 3, lost 4 times to Talia Zilean with a 43% win rate. The arrow points to what deck beats what. Right? I try to make that clear. Red is bad for the deck, green is good for the deck. And you can see there's a lot of red here. Nocturne Vex did not end up doing well despite being brought by a lot of people. So, I mean, what is it to say? It's a bad deck. Except it was banned 52 times, which is a 70% ban rate. The next most banned deck was banned 13 times. Okay, this deck had a 4 times higher ban rate than its biggest competitor. That is insane. That is like Monopoly levels of insane. So one way to interpret these stats is Nocturne Vex sucks and you should never play it and it was a mistake. Another way to interpret this is it still had a 40% win rate into the decks that wanted to beat it, right? The people who were playing Talia Zilean probably teched their deck to beat Nocturne Vex, right? I actually think that this matchup, Nocturne Vex should probably be beating Talia Zilean on average. I expect that the people who played into Nocturne Vex teched their deck for Nocturne Vex. Yeah, this is crazy. So, Maybe it sucks. Maybe you shouldn't be as scared of it. But also maybe it's actually a really good deck, despite the fact that it didn't perform so well. At least it can be used as a ban bait, right? Yeah, this is insane. I want to go over some variants. I want to go over what I think is like the stock list. So this is Church of Targon, where it's literally just a fearsome aggro deck. You slot in some Mystic Shots, Church, and a lot of people slot in some Clocklings, and that's the only P and Z. So really, it's just a fearsome deck. It just beats ass. The next one I want to go over was like a slightly slower version. You'll notice that Church's version has Stygian Onlookers and Doom Beasts. They're a lot more aggro, a lot more lower to the ground. My team's list, we omitted a lot of those. We rely purely on the Sentinels. We run a set of Vengeances and like a Thermo Beam to be cute. The idea is that this one's a little bit more control-y. It's a little bit bigger than the aggro variant. And the reason we brought it is because we think it's better into the mirror, right? So we think that this version beats this version. So don't get me wrong, this is still an aggro deck. It's still an aggro fearsome deck. It's just running, a little bit more heavy stuff to tech for the mirror and give a little bit more agency. And then the other list is a Noxus variant, which is running Stylish Shot and some Noxus fearsomes. I think this list is super cool. You'll notice it omits the Sentinels, so this list doesn't have the Sentinels. But the Stylish Shot is very funny because you're almost always going to be hitting it with Elegant Edge. Like I think if you draw the Noxus version of this, it's insane. Like if you can Stylish Shot pirouette like a fearsome blocker, and then you hit in with all your fearsomes, you get your Stylish Shots back. The idea to me is very cute. This list is also running the Iron Conquest landmark, which puts copies your fearsomes and makes them ephemeral. Yeah, I thought this was a really cute idea. I don't know how it performs compared to the PNZ, but it's fun. The next deck is Talia Zillion. This one also had a sub 50% win rate before, despite being the second most popular deck. It was brought by 11 of the 30 teams, almost a third of the field. You can see though that in the matchups that is most played, it's doing pretty all right, right? It did beat Nocturne Vex again. I think this is probably a fluke, but who knows? It beat Ashe LeBlanc. It did get a little bit farmed by Teemo Tristana and Jinx Lulu. So if you're looking to target Talia Zillion, these decks might be on your radar. It did well into Poppy, Nico, and then it was so-so into Perro King. Overall, though, it didn't actually do that stunningly. And unlike the other deck, it was only banned. I mean, it was banned 30%. That's a little high, but it's not crazy. So if you're looking at a deck that truly underperformed, I actually think Talia Zillion might be it. I think it's not even a bad deck. I think it's just really hard to pilot. And the list I want to go over was Aphrodite Alpha's list. They finished second seed, so kind of one of the winners of the tournament. The thing I want to draw your attention to is Blooming Bud plus Armed Acquisitioner or Portal Pioneer. You can turn an enemy unit into a landmark and then destroy that landmark. And that's a version of hard removal. That's just straight up like a 5-mana vengeance, essentially. Now it does require a combo of 2 cards, so it's not strictly a 5-mana vengeance, but I think that combo is the reason why it's how you beat your bad matchups a lot of the time, I think. And it's also hard removal in 2 regions that really don't have hard removal. You can also see that it's running a Castigate, and I think Aphrodite Alpha absolutely teched their deck to see Nocturne Vex because we're running a Tasty Feyfolk as well as 2 Shapestones to make our, all of our non-fearsome blockers with a Shapestone are suddenly fearsome blockers. So I actually think that this list is pretty good to look at if you're wanting to not lose to Nocturne Vex. Of course, it's also missing a lot of very common cards. Merciless Hunter, like your suite of spells is really customizable. You could be heavier on the bounces, right? All the good lists were running 3 tag out. Merciless Hunter is the main unit that I think is missing, but like I've seen some lists that just don't have Eye of the Dragon. It's very variable. I'd recommend looking at more of the lists on the master sheet, which will be linked in the description. And then our next elephant in the room is Lulu Jinx. Did very well, 62.5% win rate, brought by actually a third of the teams, 10 out of 30. Had a pretty moderate ban rate. And yeah, it absolutely farmed Ashe LeBlanc. It crushed Nocturne Vex. It crushed, I shouldn't say crushed. It did well enough in a Nocturne Vex. It was doing well into Talia Zillion, and it even had a pretty 50% matchup into Victor Lisa, and that's not bad at all. These were its most played matchups, right? So there's of course more games that I'm just not including, but I think this is a very good matchup suite. I don't have much to say other than it was a good deck, strong deck, performed well. I wanted to showcase two lists. One is Guilty Conscious, who of course finished first. They're on a very aggressive list. They're running, what is this, 14? No, 11. 11 one-drops. And they're on a very light Mecha Yordle package, right? So they're on two scrap heaps, three squeakers. This deck is playing a lot more for Jinx. It's a lot cheaper. It's a lot more discard heavy, right? There's a lot of discard cards, but not a lot of discard fodder. And so it's definitely going to be able to play for Jinx, and it's also going to be a lot more aggressive, a lot more early aggression, compared to Red Pup Games list, which is on a full set of arena promoters, a full set of squeakers, a full set of scrap heap. It's like all in on the Mecha Yordles. It's a lot more expensive. You can see like the unit count is just lower, right? They're not running nearly as many one drops. The one drops they're running is like Forge Chief instead of Gloom Sprites, Bird, right? So it's a much more expensive list. It's playing less for Jinx, but you get the advantage of those Mecha Yordles, and those can absolutely crush. So yeah. Next section of decks I want to cover is the big winners. These are decks that were not necessarily super popular, but had a very high win rate that performed very well at Aegis. These are I think the decks that you want to look at if you didn't include them in your lineup. I also want to go over the Perro King has it absolutely messed up the Aegis stat collection. Note that no Freljord Perro Kings were brought. This is actually a PNZ variant that was brought. It is true that 4 Stream variants, 2 Targon variants, 1 Bilgewater variant, and 1 PNZ variant were brought, but all of the stats were loaded onto this Freljord variant. So these stats that you're reading here are for all of the lists combined. I just want to make sure you understand that when reading this graph. Okay, Team Tristana, let's go over that first. Had a 67% win rate, did fantastically. 19-9 is really good, brought by 6 out of 30 teams, not the most popular list, but you can see it absolutely farmed to the Azillion. It did really well into Nocturne Vex. It did lose to Victor Lee Sin, so I think if you're looking to counter it, Victor Lee Sin is absolutely where you should be looking. And it did pretty well into Lulu Jinx. Just a solid deck. It did, that it had a winning matchup into the 3 popular decks, right? Like these were the 3 most brought decks, and it beat all of them. So yeah, just a good deck. Now just say it performed really well. The list I want to showcase was actually my team's list because I think this is the standard list. It's on Noxus. It's running a full set of Might. We're running some Enraged Fire Spitters. So you have this Overwhelm Cheese end game. You have a lot of burn with Fervors and Fire Spitters. Heroic Refrain for like a swarmy style. There's a lot of ways to win with this deck. We teched in a Minimorph to be cute. Not sure it's good, but it's cute. The other list I wanted to showcase was Red Lotus to finish third. They're running a PNZ variant where they're running Mystic Shots, Piltover and Castaway, which is a great unit, right? Their unit quality is a little bit higher at the cost of Fire Spitter. They're not running Fire Spitters. And instead of Might, they're running Scavenge Camo Clicker. So instead of like a Might cheese, it's like an elusive cheese. Yeah, both it did well. These are the cool lists that you might be interested in. Let's look at Victor Lee Sin. 65% win rate. Also doing really well, was brought by 5 out of 30 teams. It was only banned twice in the whole tournament, so probably not going to be the deck that your opponent bans. And you could say it's pretty green across the whole field. Beat Teemo Tristana. Was so into Lulu Jinx, did well enough. Beat Aegis LeBlanc, beat Nocturne Vex, beat the Perro King. Just good. I think it's a hard deck to play. It's not the easiest deck to play. It's not the most straightforward thing. And sometimes I think it relies a little bit on Victor keyword RNG. I think sometimes you roll Lifesteal and it's like, oh, well, the game is over. Or sometimes you roll a useless stat and you can't win. Useless stat, useless keyword, I mean. But, did well enough here. There's 2 variants I really want to go over. First is Aphrodite Alpha's list. This is the second seeded team. You can notice the things I want to draw your attention to is a full set of Sunken Temple, backed by a full set of Nopify, and a glorious evolution top end. This deck, you can point to it, you can see the win conditions, right? Like they're going to get big with a Victor, they're going to outvalue Sunken Temple, or they're going to pop off with a glorious evolution turn. Yeah, it's sort of calling back to old Karma set, except with new champs, right? Like Victor and Lee Sin are not as decisive as Karma was. But they'll still get you there, for sure. The other list was Team Envy, who actually also was top 4, so that's very important. Notice that no Sunken Temple, no Glorious Evolution. Okay, they're just running better units, right? So they're pretty much always going to be winning through a big crazy Victor or Lee Sin just bouncing them to hell, right? Of course, like ballistic bots and stuff can get there too. But yeah, they definitely opted for better units as opposed to like the easy to point out win conditions. So yeah, these are the two lists I thought were interesting. Next is Perro King, brought by 8 out of 30 teams, so actually a little bit more popular than the previous two lists. Only a 60% win rate though, but you can see it did respectively. Beat Talia Zillion, beat Ashe LeBlanc. It lost to this Gwen LeBlanc deck, which we will be talking about. It did fine enough into Jinx Lulu, did fine enough into Aphelios Victor, and that's that. It didn't play much into like Victor Lee Sin or Nocturne Vex, so I don't have those stats for you. But you know, a respectable performance. Pretty good stats. I'm showcasing my team's list. We were fifth seed with it. It's just running Sunborn Summoning, so you kind of have like 5 copies of the Perro King and some Quicksands, and everything else is Poros. There was one Bilgewater variant that brought Mariah Reef, Dragon Prince Grinzo, and Barb Chain. There was 2 Targon variants that are running Hush, Pale Cascade, and Sunburst, so you have some hard removal. And then there was a PNZ variant with like Burn top end instead. So yeah, Perro King, it's definitely an option. Did solid. And last but not least, I want to talk about the Spice of Life. So these are decks that were not popular, were like, you know, one ofs, or in the case of Gwen LeBlanc, two ofs, but did incredibly well. I'm only going to be talking about these 2 decks, but I want an honorable mention to Kaisa Sivir and Narvane. Narvane is a Warden deck because they ended up having a 66% win rate, which is pretty good. I think like, you know, these are decks that were not brought very much, but did perform well. So they might be looking at, but I'm not gonna go super in depth on them. So let's look at Gwen LeBlanc. This was brought by 2 of the 30 teams. Note that both teams ended up top 4. So all of the teams that brought this deck basically won the tournament. That's why I really want to showcase it, is because it was absolutely a good pick for the winning teams. So you can see that most of what it did was just farm Perro King. So I don't know if you could draw crazy conclusions from that, but it definitely did well into Perro King. It also beat Ashe LeBlanc, it beat Ashe Vex, and it beat Talia Zillion. You can see that it lost to Victor Lee Sin and this Gwen Morgana deck. So if you're looking for, you know, if this eventually becomes popular, maybe Victor Lee Sin is what you want to be looking at for it. Yeah, I want to showcase this. The 2 lists is Guilty Conscience, who finished first again. They're again on a huge amount of 1-drops. I think Guilty Conscience's strategy was to just run like 14 1-drops in every list and call it a day. Very, very aggressive low to the ground list. You got Redeemed Prodigies in there, you know, your Hallowed package, some Rune Reckoners. The top end is Eternal Dancers. This is very reminiscent of old Red Gwen. You got the Might and Fervors, which is solid. And that's actually very different from the other list brought by Team Envy, who ended up being the 4th seed. The cards I want to really draw your attention to is 1, they're on way less 1-drops, right? They're only on 5 instead of like, what was this? Yeah, 10. So 5 instead of 10, literally half as many 1-drops. They're on Red Barbed Razor Mace and the Iron Conquest. That's really one I want to talk to. Oh, and a full set of Enraged Fire Spitters. Red Barbed Razor Mace, I think, is a very good unit versus Talia Zillion. It's pretty much always going to proc its effect, and it's super annoying for them to have to bounce. So I think like this is a super annoying unit for Talia Zillion to see. The Iron Conquest is pretty cool. I don't know how good it is, but I think it's cool. And then they're opting for a more burn-centric late game. Like this card also works better with Might, right? So a burn and Might focused late game as opposed to Eternal Dancers. And the Harrowing, right? Like this is just a much more top-end heavy list. But still did well enough, right? 4th seed and 2nd seed and 1st seed are basically the same thing in this tournament, right? Both these teams went 3-0. So yeah, a very good showing from this deck. And then the last deck I want to show you was Nlyciver. It was only brought by 1 team. That team ended up being, I think, the 3rd seed. So they're one of the teams that went 3-0. So this deck was only played 3 times. And it's 3 times it was played. It beat Nocturne Vex twice and beat Morgana Vex once. I don't know if there's a lot to gain from that, but the fact that it was 3-0 and it was included in the lineup of a team that went 3-0, I think is significant. It's also super spicy. I loved looking at this list. It's got Mystic Shots, of course. That's why you're in PNZ. But it's got Scavenged Camo Cloaker. I don't know how often this happens, but I love the idea of using Scavenged Camo Cloaker on my Sivir. That just seems like a ton of fun. I don't know. I've never played it, so I don't know how good it is. The other thing I want to draw your attention to is Used Cask Salesman. Is it good? I don't know, but it sure is cool. Also, I like the idea that you put the Darkened Blood letters on the little 0/1 ephemeral that spawns. That just seems like a funny thing. And otherwise, we're just running a Nidalee package, right? Avenging Vastaya, Big Game Tycoon, All-Terrain Trooper. Interestingly enough, it's not running the Overwhelm Transform guy, and it's not running the Aurora Halonatus, the 4 mana one. I think those, like in previous Nidalee lists when Nidalee was more popular, I think those were cards that we saw pretty often, and it's interesting that this omitted them. So again, this is a spicy list. I don't know exactly how good it is, but it performed well enough. And that's the conclusion of my presentation. I'm hoping to do one each week. This did take a lot of time for me to make, but I can cut down the time a little bit with some optimizations. But yeah, would you want to see more? Should I include my face cam? I'm doing it for viewer retention, but maybe it's just weird. I'm not sure. Yeah, I just love some feedback. These are sort of questions that I want to ask, but any feedback is welcome. I appreciate watching it and enjoy the Aegis League. Um, yeah, I want to go over one of the goals of this is to sort of move the meta along, right? I think if everyone's in the know, the meta will evolve. The other thing is I want an easy way for people to keep up with Aegis without them having to like attend the Twitch streams or follow the Discord. So that's another goal of this, is I want to sort of keep people who are interested in Aegis but aren't necessarily playing to be in the loop and just get the important stuff, right? Get the interesting data right away. So I hope I can provide that for you. Thank you so much.